A second assassination attempt against Donald Trump took place this week. You may not have heard about it, though, because the corporate media is busy pretending it didn't happen. It was only 2 months ago that President Trump was literally shot in the head. If you asked me then, I would have said this election was over and that Trump was about to win all 50 states. But then something amazing happened. The entire power of the Democratic apparatus pulled a Julius Caesar on Joe Biden, and their lapdogs in the corporate press manufactured support for the least popular vice president in history, so that now we're in a coin flip of a race, and the photo of Donald Trump pumping his fist in the air with blood running down his face is just a forgotten memory. This time, it took less than 2 days before the media effectively moved on, and most Americans probably don't even know about this second gunman at the grassy golf course. There have been rumors that since Donald Trump saved the cats in Springfield, Ohio, they granted him access to 9 lives. Let's hope he doesn't have to use another anytime soon. I'm Tyler Chrestman. Welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Okay, so today on the show, we are going to talk about 3 things. We have 3 topics. We have the second assassination attempt on Donald Trump, the new acne exploding pagers from Israel, and illegal immigrants voting. It's going to be 3 fun things today. But first, my favorite comment from last week. My favorite comment, this one was on YouTube from Carl Reed 6186, who said, quote, "You lack of knowledge of what caused inflation would fill a book," end quote. Carl, while it is true that I don't know a lot about a lot of things, I can give you a basic economic 101 on inflation very simply. Inflation is too much money chasing after too few goods and services. It's caused from government spending and printing money in excess. End of lesson. You're now a graduate of basic economics. The book, very small book. It doesn't take much to understand inflation. It's actually a very straightforward and simple concept, and I think I understand it pretty well. I hope now you do too. Now, on to, congratulations, by the way, on your diploma from the Tyler Chrestman School of Economics. It's a very prestigious institution here. Now we're going to move on to our first topic of the day. Did you hear? I don't know if you've heard. Somebody tried to assassinate Donald Trump. And I'm not talking about months ago. I'm not talking about the shooter on the roof. I'm talking about this week. Did you hear about it? If you watch the news, maybe you did. Maybe you caught a little blip. Maybe there was a tiny little segment that they did on whatever show or program that you happen to like. But I've talked to people in everyday life who just have no idea that this happened, that this was just a complete thing that nobody seems to care about. And it's wild to me. We're talking about a media blackout of a second assassination attempt against the former president of the United States. I know this is a game that is a waste of time to play, but the hypothetical, what if it happened to the other side thing is just, it's too easy. Imagine for a second. Now, not talking about a couple months ago when Donald Trump was literally shot in the head, but I'm talking about just this week. What happened, I'm going to describe the details a little bit later, but imagine for a second that it was Barack Obama who was walking on a golf course, and it turned out that 400 yards away, there was some shots exchanged with a would-be assassin. This would be a major news cycle for months and months and months. Everyone would talk about it. It'd probably have some sort of racial undertone. There would be all sorts of things. Think pieces would come out about the heart of America and what this means and white supremacy and blah, blah, blah. All this nonsense would happen, and it wouldn't stop. Nobody is talking about the fact that this is the second time in 2 months that Donald Trump, someone has tried to murder the former president of the United States. Now, I understand that presidents receive death threats all the time. I understand that there are always going to be plots out there against people in power. This makes sense. But this is the second time someone got within 400 yards of the president with a gun in the attempts to murder the man. And nobody seems to care. The complete blanket, a lack of coverage by the media. A blanket has been thrown over this topic. You're not allowed to talk about it on the media. Again, maybe a news segment the day it happened. Oh, someone took a shot at the president, and then it just went away. It's now Friday. Why is no one talking about it? I don't want to throw her under the bus. My mom doesn't watch the news. I talked to her yesterday, this morning. I talked to her, And she said, oh, wait, I didn't know that happened. And that's the average American right now. They don't know that it happened, and it's not their fault. Even if you don't watch the news, the fact that someone tried to kill the former president should be something that people are talking about. But even people who watch the news, it has been downplayed so much that no one cares. No one seems to understand that this is not normal. It's not okay. And meanwhile, you have people like Joe Biden and what's her name? That terrible press secretary. Kareem, whatever her name is, she is out there defending their rhetoric, saying, oh, it's fine. It's the Republicans are mean and nasty and mean, but we're fine. And Donald Trump really is a threat to democracy and an evil, nasty man and the second coming of Adolf Hitler, but our rhetoric has nothing to do with the assassination attempts against him. That's crazy. He's a threat to democracy. He wants to destroy our entire country. But why would somebody use what we're saying and then take that seriously? I mean, we're just talking. It's just politics, right? We don't actually believe it. That's what they're really telling you. Because if they believed it, of course they would want Donald Trump to be murdered. And maybe they do, but they can't say it. And so they're defending this rhetoric that Donald Trump is the worst thing that ever happened in the world. Meanwhile, they have to then go out and say, oh my God, I can't believe someone would try and kill him. That's terrible. I don't believe you. I don't believe you. One way or the other, I don't believe you. Either I don't believe you when you say these things about Donald Trump, that he's a threat to democracy, or I don't believe that you're actually upset that someone tried to kill him. One or the other. Either you're lying in one or you're lying in the other. And I don't care which one it is, you're a liar. So let's do a breakdown real quick, because some people don't know. I know we're talking about this, but like I said, most people don't know what's going on. So let's do a breakdown of events. We're not going to name the guy. This is always a good policy for people who are seeking infamy. We don't give them publicity, but we will talk about him. So it was a guy who's older. I think he was in his 50s. I actually don't remember how old he is off the top of my head, but he looked like a guy in his 50s, maybe even 60s, a little older. And basically what he did was he had a rifle of some kind, and he was hiding in the bushes at a golf resort that Donald Trump owns and was staying at. He didn't know when Donald Trump would be out playing golf, but he assumed that Donald Trump would be out playing golf because Donald Trump plays a lot of golf. And so he was hiding in the bushes. They say for about 12 hours he was in the bush. The Secret Service protection for Donald Trump was patrolling the golf course. They were playing a couple of holes ahead of him, just checking the perimeter. And one of the Secret Service agents spotted the barrel of a rifle sticking out of the bushes. I don't know how this guy was positioned, but I can imagine he's not that bright if you're going to stick the barrel of your gun out. I don't really know. Like I said, I don't know what it looked like, but I can imagine he's just not very bright. Anyway, the Secret Service spotted his rifle, and they shot at him. No one was saying, I don't think he was hit at all, which, by the way, maybe we should get some target practice for our Secret Service. I don't know why you're missing your shots. I feel like that's kind of an important part of your job, is to be able to hit the target, but they've missed. He runs away. He gets in his car. He drives away. Someone sees the car, catches the license plate. Eventually, he's picked up a little bit later. Donald Trump, he was, they say, within 400 yards of the guy, but he was a hole or two back on the golf course. He wasn't up there at the hole. He didn't actively get engaged with the shooter. The shooter never got a shot off at him. So this guy, he was an avid Ukraine supporter. He actually, it said that he voted for Donald Trump in 2016 and then became disillusioned and has been very staunchly Democrat ever since. For example, he has a Biden-Harris sticker on his truck when he was apprehended. He is not a Republican. He is a Democrat. He is a Ukraine supporter, and this guy is so crazy. He went over and tried to join one of the Ukrainian legions to fight the Russians. That's how out of the box this guy is. I don't believe, according to what I've read, I don't believe he had any military training, and yet he tried to go fight in a war for Ukraine for some reason. He does have a history of criminal convictions. And this is interesting. His history of criminal convictions includes some charges that are just wild. So he had multiple felonies for possession of stolen goods. He had a hit and run. He got charged with carrying a concealed weapon, resisting a police officer. And this is a crazy one. I didn't actually know that this was how they charged this crime. But he was convicted of possessing a weapon of mass destruction, which again, I go, what the hell does that mean? And you look it up, and it means that he had in his possession a fully automatic machine gun, which I guess they classify as a weapon of mass destruction, which is something I did not know. I know that it is illegal. It is a federal crime to have a fully automatic rifle without a license for such a thing. You can get one. They're kind of difficult to obtain. You can get one, and I've had the opportunity to shoot some fully automatic rifles. Pretty cool, pretty fun, but it's an expensive process, and it's a lengthy one. He didn't have that, and I guess that's how they classify the charge. So this guy, he's a multiple-time felon. He has been convicted of some pretty serious crimes. I think resisting a police officer and carrying around a machine gun are pretty serious crimes. And the thing about this is that I find that boggle my mind. He had never did jail time. Never. For any of these crimes. You're talking about a guy who has multiple felonies, never spent a day in jail. What the hell is wrong with our legal system? We should send more people to prison. A controversial statement, I know, because we have the largest prison population in the world. We should send more people to jail. This idea that there's a bunch of people in jail and they don't deserve to be there is nonsense. This guy should have been in jail at some point in his life. Maybe you reform your life. Maybe you turn your things around. Awesome, great. That should be the goal of the institution of prison. That should be the goal, rehabilitating people and getting them back out in things. I think we should redesign what prison looks like to focus on that goal. Prison is not just a punishment. What you're doing is you're taking people and you should be trying to make them better so when they get out, the recidivism rate is low. That should be the goal of prison. But a bunch of people, it's not like we stack prison with a bunch of people who shouldn't be there. People who go to jail tend to have done something wrong. There's not a bunch of people in there on trumped-up charges or because they had a little tiny baggie of marijuana and they got sent to prison for years and years. These people don't exist. What is true is that most of the people in jail are there for violent crimes. They are there for things like murder, assault, rape, and property damage. Serious crimes. That's what people go to jail for. They do not go to jail for drug crimes, low-level things. And I know what people are going to say. Tyler, 50% of the prison population is in there for nonviolent drug offenses. I'm sorry. They're lying to you. That is not true. 50% of the people in federal prison are there for drug crimes. Do you know how you go to federal prison for drug crimes? It's not because you're a low-level person who just got caught with a baggie of weed. It's because you're a drug trafficker. 50% of people in federal prison are there for drug crimes. Federal prison means you violated a big law. Big law. It's not small things. They don't send people to federal prison for small things. So, but the federal prison population only accounts for a small percentage of people who are in prison. When you look at the people who are in prison, the 1 million people that we have in prison in this country, it is in state and local jails. And the people in state and local jails are overwhelmingly there for violent crime. There's not people in there. We don't have a bunch of people in there who are there because they just jaywalked and they threw a gum wrapper on the ground. Those people don't exist. This guy should have been in prison at some point in his life. Maybe we could have helped him. Maybe we could have identified him as a crazy person who shouldn't be out on his own without some sort of medication and some sort of probation that you have to check in every day. Why is this guy able to fly to Ukraine and try and join the Foreign Legion? I don't know. I don't understand the rules on this or how this guy, a multiple-time felon, managed to get interviews with prestigious institutions. I think he was in the Washington Post or the New York Times. I can't remember which off the top of my head. But he did on-camera interviews with people about the Ukraine war. What? This guy shouldn't have been in possession of a firearm, and you're interviewing him like he's a recruit for the Ukrainian army. It's wild. It's wild that this guy was out there just living his life, doing whatever he wanted, multiple-time felon. I have nothing against someone who is a felon and has done their time and is back out as a productive member of society. That is the goal. People make mistakes. Things happen. Obviously, some crimes are heinous, and you can't forgive them. There are certain things, like if you do certain things. Let me give an example. Just get a little personal here. I can imagine this for a second. I can imagine a scenario where I would have to kill somebody. Imagine someone breaks in my house right now. The front door is right over there. Someone kicks in the door. We're going to have a fight to the death. If he dies, oh well, That's what happens. I can imagine a scenario where someone hurts someone close to me. You hurt my mom or my sister or a friend of mine. You hurt somebody. And I can understand the urge to want revenge. That makes sense. You say, okay, I get that. So you say there are some people who will kill someone, whether in self-defense or in a crime, even a crime of passion in some circumstances. Again, imagine that. You walk in and someone's beating up your mom and you kill that person. And you say, I understand this. I'm not saying it's justifiable. I'm just saying I understand it. Then there are some crimes that are completely, there's no understanding. They are heinous. They're bad. Prison for life. And you're talking about things like rape or hurting children, these kind of things. So my point is, there are people who have done crimes, and you say they've done their time, they get out, and you say, let's hope you get your life on track, because everyone makes mistakes, and I get that. And then there are people who can't do that. This guy, just because he's a felon, doesn't mean he's a bad person. Now, this assassination attempt against Donald Trump kind of seals that deal. But you say, all right, but why is it that he's just on the FBI's radar? They had been talked about him. Oh, this guy who's not supposed to have a gun, he has a gun. This guy who's a multiple-time felon, he's flying to Ukraine. He's doing whatever he wants. Why is it that we lose track of people like this? This guy was not he didn't make one mistake in his life. We're talking multiple-time felon. He had been convicted multiple times of multiple different felonies on multiple different occasions. That is not someone who made a one-time mistake who society should embrace and rehabilitate and try to re-inculcate into society. This is a person who should be on everyone's radar and everyone's watch list. And how does he get within 400 yards of the president with a rifle? What happened? What is going on in this country that is allowed to happen? In the Secret Service this time, they did their job. Their job was to protect the president from harm. They did a good job of scouting the area, spotting the threat, neutralizing the threat. They need to work on their grouping, apparently, but they did a good job of doing their job. But how did we wind up in this point where a crazy person was able to acquire a firearm and shoot at the president? This is not a gun control problem, by the way. You'll see people try to spin it that way. It's not a gun control problem. This is a mental illness, crazy person problem. This guy is clearly not stable. He's not a stable individual member of society. That's not what is happening right now. I think if I look at my friends, for example, I look at people I know, my family members, my friends, people I know, and I say, okay, I have a large friend group. I have a large family. Let's imagine for a second that in this group of people, there's going to be a crazy person. And I say the one person who just is mentally unhinged, unstable, we don't know it. Maybe it's a shock to the system that this person's out there existing in the world, but they exist, and we just don't know. Is the solution to keep everybody in that group safe that we should just bar all the weapons from all of the people to keep them safe? Does it make them safe is actually the question. Let's imagine for a second it's one of my friends. I do a lot of MMA type stuff. I like fighting. I've trained a good portion of my life doing various things. Let's imagine it's one of my friends from one of those instances. So it's somebody that I either met boxing or wrestling or doing jiu-jitsu, something like this. And let's imagine that one of those friends is also the person who is mentally unstable, bipolar or schizophrenic or something like this. And we say, all right, well, to keep everyone safe, we definitely don't want this guy to have a weapon. But let's take the weapons away, because we don't know how to just get the weapon away from him, so we take the weapons away from everybody. We haven't made anyone safe. How have we made my sister safe? If she's confronted with this person, well, my sister now, the great equalizer in that situation would be if my sister had a weapon. And this guy is a weapon. So all of a sudden, he can just use his strength, use his skill, use his knowledge to do whatever he wants, because he's the biggest and baddest person around, and no one can fight him off because they don't have access to weapons. We haven't made anyone safe by taking weapons away from people. What we need to figure out is how to keep weapons away from this one guy, and we don't do a good job of that. I have weapons. I have guns that I think all of which have been lost in a lake, but I used to have them. And imagine for a second that you came to me and you said, Tyler, well, we got to keep you safe. We need your gun. I say, well, you go to hell. I don't understand how you think that keeps me safe. I understand. I don't want the crazy people to have guns. I don't want the criminals to have guns. No one wants that. This guy shouldn't legally have been allowed to own a firearm. So you say, what law are we going to pass that makes it so that this guy couldn't have a firearm? He already had it, and he's not supposed to. He already was breaking the law. The gun control law is not the thing that's going to keep people safe. There are more guns in this country than there are people. Think about that for a second. Think of how many people there are. There are more guns than that. We're not going to keep guns off of the streets of America. What we need to do is take gun crime seriously. This guy had a machine gun. You're not supposed to have a machine gun. And you're going to hear me. I am a gun owner. I am a strong advocate for the Second Amendment. We can recite it off the top of my head right now. I understand the Second Amendment. I believe in it. I believe in Heller versus District of Columbia, the idea that your right to self-protection, your right to a firearm is unconnected to your service in the militia. This was decided in 2008. It was a good thing that just basically said you're allowed to own firearms disconnected from service in the militia. That first line of the Second Amendment no longer counts. It's not what we're talking about today. And I support this. I think everyone should have firearms. I think they make people safer. You'll see, though, that there are people who argue on the other side of this. They want to say that actually, according to the statistics, having a firearm in your house, you're more likely to die from firearm use. Okay, yes, I understand that. People who are suicidal shouldn't have access to firearms. That's a hard one to address. You shouldn't give a guy who wants to kill himself a gun. I understand. It's a hard problem to address because how do you do it? Red flag laws, blah, 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 whatever the case may be. I understand. It's a hard thing. People who are convicted of domestic abuse shouldn't have access to firearms. If you have been arrested and convicted of a crime, a domestic abuse crime, and I understand this one's kind of a difficult one sometimes because I personally, not me personally, but I have seen personally some of the ways that the justice system gets perverted when it comes to domestic abuse claims. And there is nothing I despise more than a guy who's going to beat up some woman. That is, I'm not going to sit here and ever make light of that. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is I have seen some women abuse that system to their advantage. And that is unfortunate. And I'm not going to get into details because it's not the appropriate place for it. But my entire point is guns are difficult. It is a difficult problem to address. But making laws that criminals don't respect isn't going to keep safer. This guy shouldn't have had a gun. He shouldn't have been able to get within 400 yards of the president. That is not the thing that should be allowed to happen. But the solution isn't gun control, which I have seen people try to pivot to. The solution is we need to do a better job keeping an eye on crazy people. The FBI needs to do a better job of tracking crazy people. This guy was convicted of possessing a weapon of mass destruction. You know what that means to me as a gun owner? And then I remember this is where I was going with this originally. The idea, if you commit a gun crime, so for example, you are arrested and you have a machine gun. You have a Glock that you've installed a switch on. You have a gun that you're not supposed to have. You're a felon who is in possession of a firearm. You go to prison for 10 to 20 years, like a murder. The only reason you have a gun that you're not supposed to have is to do bad things. This is coming from someone who believes people should own guns, that is a strong supporter of gun rights. But if you have a gun you're not supposed to have, you have it for nefarious purposes, immediately jail, 10 years. This guy shouldn't have even been out of prison after having been convicted of owning a machine gun that was illegal on a federal level. As a felon, he had this. Prison. Why are you not in jail? It makes no sense to me, and that's the solution. Send more people to prison. We don't plea it down. You're in possession of a firearm that you're not supposed to have. This is not a plea deal. This is a you go to prison deal. If that part of the plea deal, then fine. But you don't get a light sentence. You don't go to 3 months in the county jail and then you're out. No. Years and years. This is a serious crime. And this guy committed it, and he never spent a day in jail. It's outrageous. It's ridiculous. Instead of not spending a day in jail, he got to fly to Ukraine and be on the news. I don't understand how. We're not a serious country. When it comes to enforcing laws, we're not a serious country. This is nonsense. It makes no sense to me. Ugh, getting all worked up. The whole thing is just crazy. I just don't understand how no one seems to care that this guy just took a shot at the president. Or I guess he didn't technically take a shot, but you know what I'm saying. Anyway, we're going to move on. Topic number 2. We spent a long time on that. I was just looking at the clock here. Oh, my gosh. That's way longer than I thought. I was just ranting, going off on a tangent. Who knows? I went off on my bullet point list here substantially. It's just crazy. I just was, I get all worked up about guns rights and crazy people. They just get me all fired up. Anyway, on to topic number 2. Israel. I know what I'm about to say is going to upset a lot of people. But Israel just accomplished one of the greatest military operations in the history of warfare. I don't care who knows that I think it's great. I think that what they did is great. I think it's amazing. And I'm in awe at their ingenuity. It was a great plan, and you got to hand it to the Israeli Defense Force. They do a great job of operations like this. So let's describe it in detail. What happened? Basically, it seems like, we don't know this for a fact, but what it seems like is that Israel knew that Hezbollah, which is the group, it's based in Lebanon. For our little Middle East lesson, Lebanon is on the northern end of Israel. The terrorist wing of Lebanon is called Hezbollah. Hezbollah is the group to the north of Israel. They are backed by Iran. They are basically one of the groups that is constantly at war with Israel. And Hezbollah uses pagers. And they use pagers because pagers are low tech, and Israel is really sophisticated, and they're great at hacking cell phones. So it's been known for years that Hezbollah uses basically low technology walkie-talkies and pagers instead of cell phones for their communication. Israel, about 6 months ago, they manufactured a gigantic shipment of knockoff pagers. And inside those knockoff pagers, they planted 1 to 2 grams of explosives and a special battery that they could send code to that would cause the battery to overheat, which would then cause the grams of explosive in the pager to explode. It is a genius plan, and somehow, we don't know how, and I imagine we won't know for a long time, if ever, but they managed to, Hezbollah was getting a shipment of pagers. They managed to somehow switch the knockoff pagers with the real pagers, and then Hezbollah distributed the pagers to their members, and then Israel basically sent the code after all the pagers were distributed and caused all the pagers to explode. Now, this wounded 2,800 people. At least 9 people were dead. I saw in the numbers, it's possible 12 people were killed, but somewhere around there. A relatively low number of people killed, but a gigantic number of people were wounded. 2,800 people. That's how many pagers I guess they threw out or somewhere around there. It is true. So you'll see the things that people are complaining about. They'll say that they went too far. They're condemning the attack. They're saying it's terroristic in nature. Oh, my God, Israel, they violated all these things. Look at the Geneva Convention. Look at this. Look at that. It is not true. This is the most targeted strike that you have ever seen in warfare. And what do I mean by that? It means there were civilians who were killed. It's true. It looks like at least 2 possible young people were killed by the thing, and they're saying some of them. But Hezbollah themselves confirmed that 8 fighters were killed. So if 8 fighters were killed and they're only claiming 9 casualties, it means that there's maybe 1 casualty, or 1 person killed in this attack unintentionally. Now, it's true there are probably people injured, but let me just, for example, explain something to you. There was not a way that you would ever have seen this many terrorists to civilian ratio of terrorists hurt and killed to civilians hurt and killed in any warfare operation ever, period. End of discussion. If it had been a rocket strike, no, it would never have happened. The ratio would be off. Even if they had gone in there and fought in the streets with guns, the number of civilians would have been much greater than just this targeted attack. This is the most precise attack in the history of warfare because they knew that those pagers only go to members of Hezbollah. They do not go to civilians. There's not a civilian walking around with a pager in Lebanon unless you're a member of this terrorist organization. They were not given out. They were not just handed out to people at the county fair. That's not what was going on. In Beirut, The people walking around with pagers are members of a terrorist organization. Israel knew that, and they did this. And it is always sad when there is collateral damage, but this is the most precise strike in the history of warfare. It is not even close. The leader, by the way, and for people who don't understand this, the leader of Hezbollah said that this was a severe blow against his organization. And then he reiterated that they're going to come back stronger and they're going to continue their daily strikes against northern Israel. Well, hold on. Israel's the bad guy, right? They did this attack. It hurt civilians. Well, what is he talking about? Oh, because Hezbollah has been launching daily rocket attacks for almost a year into northern Israel. Does that sound targeted? Is it just because we give them a pass? For what reason? Because Israel shoots some of them down? There have been 50 people in Israel killed from these rocket attacks in the last year. Are we just supposed to ignore that? No, 60 to 100,000 Israelis have had to be evacuated from northern Israel, and they've been gone for almost a year. The entire north of the country has had to be abandoned because of the rocket attacks that Hezbollah is raining down on Israel every single day. But somehow the beepers it's too much, because Israel didn't just launch. If they had just launched missiles into Lebanon, everyone would condemn that too. But Lebanon gets to do it, Hezbollah gets to do it, and everyone goes, they just ignore it. Because they're not paying attention to it. Because Israel had to evacuate the country so people aren't killed every single day. Oh, but Israel did something with the beepers. That's too far gone. No, you just don't understand what's going on the ground. Hezbollah is launching a war from the north against Israel. They don't get to whine because they got outplayed. That's not the way it works. There's no one who had one of those beepers that was a good guy, I promise you. If the beeper exploded and it was next to someone who happened to be innocent, that's unfortunate. But that's what would have happened. That's what does happen when they launch rockets into Israel. They're launching them at civilians. That's the difference between Israel and Hezbollah. This was a targeted strike against beepers known to be worn by terrorists that happened to injure civilians. When they launch rockets into Israel, they're aimed at civilians. That's the difference. It's not comparable at all. And this was just an incredibly impressive, ingenious feat that you got to just take your hat off to Israel. They do things like this sometimes. Remember, there's a movie made about it, but Israel, they don't mess around with this kind of stuff. The people, for example, who mastermind the Munich killing of the Israeli team in the Munich Olympics, do we remember what happened to those guys? Israel said, if you're not going to hold them accountable, we'll hold them accountable. And they went around the world and they assassinated the masterminds of that terrible event. And that's what they do. They don't mess around, and they shouldn't. I'm pro killing terrorists. So you explode the beepers of a whole bunch of people who happen to be working for Hezbollah, good. That's all I say. Good. The fact that 2,800 terrorists are in the ER with their balls blown off because they wore their beeper on their belt, good. I hope they all lost their fingers. They were sitting there crying, oh my God, my husband lost his fingers. Good. I don't care. I hope that if he wants to fire rockets into Israel, which is what those people wearing the beepers are doing, if they want to kill Jews, I don't care when they get killed in return. I don't care. You don't get to launch a genocidal war against an entire group of people, and then I'm not going to feel bad for you when those people fight back. I don't believe that the people wearing the beepers were just innocent civilians. You don't get one being a member of Hezbollah. You don't get a pass from me. Oh, I don't feel bad for you. Anyone who in their heart didn't want to kill the Jews, who just wanted to live their life, who was killed by this incident or maimed by this incident, I feel bad for those people. But of those 2,800 people who were injured and killed, I don't think that's a large percentage of them. I think Israel did a good thing by fighting a terrorist organization. If everyone who said they're a member of Hezbollah was wiped off the face of the earth would be a better place. They're bad people. They're bad people who belong to organizations like this. They're bad people who belong to Hamas. They're bad people who belong to the Houthis. They're bad people who belong to groups like Hezbollah. Boko Haram. If they all just got wiped off, if they all lost their war and they were done, the world would be a better place. The people who live in Beirut would be happier if those people were gone. because they would actually be given the chance to flourish in life. Lebanon is a failed state, so I don't feel bad. I don't feel bad. I think it's a good thing that this happened. And I heard, I haven't read as much about it, but I guess Israel did a second round where they blew up a bunch of walkie-talkies, injuring 600 people, killing some more people. Good. We don't want our terrorists to operate with impunity. Anyway, on to our last topic. Man, I'm talking long today. What the heck? Illegal immigrants voting. Does it happen? I've heard it doesn't ever happen. It's not real. Voter fraud is fake, is what they tell us. It never happens. Our elections are the most secure in history ever. Okay, whatever you say. Explain this to me then, because I think it's silly to pretend that voter fraud doesn't exist. I think we're just pretending, and I don't know why we would. First of all, I think less people should vote. I've said this multiple times. I think that entirely too many people vote. People who don't take politics seriously shouldn't vote. People who don't know anything about the issue shouldn't vote. I'm all for some sort of initiative that you have to be able to pass a basic test about how government works to vote on a ballot. A basic one. I'm not saying anything hard. I'm saying like 5-6 questions you got to know the answers to. Hey, you got to know all 3 branches of government. You have to, I don't know, be able to recognize the functions of each branch, or at least know whatever basics. I'm trying to think of what would be easy enough. 3 branches of government would be a good one. I think most people probably don't know that who go to vote. They don't even know that there are 3 branches of government. You have to know what the federal document is that, or what we call the federal document that lays out the structure of government. So you have to know the name, the Constitution, or the Declaration of Independence. You have to know just certain little things. I think less people should vote. I don't think most people would pass a test that I would put together. And I think the test would be it would be aimed at 3rd graders. So that would be it. In Oregon, the most liberal state in the entire country, it turns out that they accidentally registered over 300 illegal immigrants to vote because they passed a law that said that when people obtain driver's licenses, they are going to be automatically registered to vote. And they also passed a law that said that illegal immigrants can now obtain driver's licenses. So what happened? A bunch of illegals went and got driver's licenses and were automatically added to the voter rolls. Oops, they said. We didn't mean to. Oops. Well, let me ask you this. Who could have predicted that it was a bad idea to do either of these things? And I go, all right, let's give it some thought. Who could have predicted that these kind of laws are a terrible idea? And then I think, well, probably anyone with a functioning prefrontal cortex, anyone with the capacity for rational thought. So if you haven't been hit in the head with a hammer, you probably knew that this was a bad idea. There are always going to be unintended consequences for any bill that you pass, any law that you do, any action that you take in life. There are unintended consequences. This is just a rule of the way of the world. We cannot always predict what's going to happen, but there are some things that are more predictable than others. And one of the things we should be able to predict is that we should not be making it easier for people who have broken the law to do anything. So when we say we're going to make it so that illegals can get driver's licenses, no, we shouldn't. We shouldn't be saying it's okay that you're here. It's okay that you broke the law. It's not. We can pretend. In certain cases, we can pretend that, this guy's just here to work and that's fine. And he wants to, pick our fruit or be a nanny or a cleaning lady. And we say, all right, I get it. I'm not hating on people who want to work and this is an opportunity they had. I'm not hating on those people. If you work hard and you do this, I'm not going to sit here and say you're a bad person. I don't believe that. But what I'm saying is I don't think there should be a thing that we're doing to make your life more comfortable. I don't believe that we should. I think you broke the law, and that's wrong, and you shouldn't break the law, and we're not going to make it easier for you to function in a society when you're operating under the guise of being a criminal. So I'm not going to say that. But the predictable result was that we were obviously going to do this. This is obvious that our elections are not as secure as we pretend. And I think it's silly to say that they are. I think that our elections should be secure. Because I've said this before. I actually made this argument to a friend of mine once, and I don't think he had a good answer because I don't think there is a good answer, which is this. Let me just lay out a scenario for you here. Let's pretend, or let me grant you for a second, that I say that there is no voter fraud at all. We have zero levels of voter fraud in the country. There's not a single negative impact that has ever been had on an election ever. Our elections are the most secure in the world in its entirety. Let me just grant that for a second. But let's say that despite all of this wonderful election protection that we have in our election, there's still a gigantic group, a huge percentage of the American population that believes that our elections are not secure. Okay? So they say our elections are secure, 100%. We've never had a single fraudulent vote ever. But a giant group of people believe that to be the case, that there could be voter fraud. Okay, so even in this system, even when we have the perfect system, which we don't, but in this dream scenario where we do, if a giant percentage of the population believes that voter fraud is possible, it still leads to a decay in our society, in our ability to conduct good elections, in our ability to transfer power one person to the other, even if our elections are 100% secure. So what is the solution to this? The solution is we need to get these people who believe that the election could be stolen, and we need to find a way to make it so that they don't believe that they know our elections are secure. So what does that mean? It means we should do basic things. There are some very easy things that we could do to make our elections secure, even if you don't believe that they're not secure right now, that we should do to make them, give them the appearance of being secure and make everybody feel at ease. And those things are very simple, one of which is you should have to have a valid ID to vote. That's an easy one. Make it so that everyone needs a valid ID to vote. And you can make it unattached to a driver's license. The way we get a passport, you can make that for a voting license. You get a voting license, and that's just a license you have. It's got your photo on it. It's got a voting license. If the argument is, as I've heard before, which is it's a specious argument that makes no sense, but I've heard that people have said that it's racist. Well, why is it racist? Because black people have a harder time getting ID. Total nonsense, but that's the argument. Okay, take that part out of it. We say, we're going to get you a voting card. You have to go one time. You have to get this voting card. It is your voting card. And you can have it. You can replace it. It's got your picture on it. And there you go. You got a voter ID card. You have to show that to vote. Or you can show your driver's license, or you can show your passport, whatever it is. But you have to have a valid form of ID. Another thing we can do, stop mail-in ballots. Stop them. No ballot mail-in. No early voting. No. Bad. No early voting unless you're in the military or you are infirmed in the hospital and you physically cannot make it to the ballot box. You do not get to vote early. If you can't show up on election day to vote, too fucking bad. Sorry for the language. Too bad. And you don't get to vote. That's the way it is. If it's not important enough for you to show up, you don't get a vote. You don't get to just vote early because you are busy that day. I don't care. Doesn't matter. No early voting. No mail-in voting, with the exception of members of the military or people who are too sickly to leave their house or the hospital. None of that makes it much more secure. No ballot drop boxes. No early voting. All of you, and by the way, I recommend this for everyone. If you have the option, which I believe everybody does, if you have the option, vote with paper ballots. That's my other thing. The voting machines, take them out of the equation. Vote by paper ballot, because there is a physical copy of a paper ballot. Paper ballots are much harder to manipulate than their counterparts. And that's it. Those are my solutions. Not all of it is going to make everything secure, but it makes everyone feel better, even if we grant that the elections are the most secure there's ever been, which clearly isn't the case because we just know in one place that we've got hundreds of illegals who've been added to the rolls after being assured that this would never happen ever, never, ever, ever, never, ever, never, ever, forever. It would never happen. Well, it's happening. It's happening right now. And it's just silly to pretend that there's not ways to cheat. I don't know why people want to argue about it. I do know, and I feel like it's actually done in a completely disgraceful manner, that people argue against things like voter integrity laws. I think it's just not a Republican and Democrat issue. It should not be. everyone should want to make sure our elections are secure. This has nothing to do. I will say I believe less people should vote, but none of this is actually a barrier of entry to voting. None of this prevents any group of people from voting. I want everyone to have the same standards. There's nothing about this is to depress voter turnout. Nothing of what I just described would depress voter turnout or is designed to. All it is doing is saying you are who you are. You get one vote in one precinct at every election cycle. That's it. Oh, I remember my other thing, my last one. I know a lot of people don't like this. After every presidential election, I believe that the voter rolls should be purged in every county, in every state, in every city. I think that the voter rolls should be completely expunged every 4 years, and you should have to re-register to vote every 4 years. Now, why do I believe this? Because you have people who die and people who move and people who they have been found to be on multiple different, they've been found to have access to multiple different precincts in multiple states after a move. Every 4 years, you should expunge the voter rolls. And then you just say, if you can't take 10 minutes out of your day to re-register to vote once every 4 years, it's not that important to you. You don't get a vote. If it's too complicated to register to vote, you also don't get to vote. The argument that it's so complicated, how do you do it? It's incredibly easy. It is incredibly easy to vote. It's really not hard, and if you're too dumb to do it, I don't know what to tell you. You shouldn't be voting in the first place. We could every 4 years after every presidential election in January of the next year, December 31st, we expunge the rolls after the November elections, and in January, you send out a thing to everyone and say, hey, everyone, remember, you have to re-register to vote. Here are the steps. You can just fill out this piece of paper and send it back if you still live here or whatever the case may be. It's that easy. Do those things, make the election secure, then you wouldn't have stupid things like registering illegal immigrants to vote because this law would be unnecessary. You wouldn't need to register everyone who gets a driver's license to vote. You just don't need to do it. It's a stupid law, and illegal shouldn't be getting driver's license and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, okay, done ranting for the day. I feel like I went off on some tangents here. It's a long episode for me. I don't know what to tell you. I hope you enjoyed it. Anyway, we are going to leave it there for the week. And as always, questions, comments, concerns, leave them in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe, all the good stuff. You know what to do. And I will catch you guys next Friday.